You ever have one of those nights you tell yourself, okay, that's it, just 2 episodes and then I'm going to bed. But then, hours later, you're still there, bleary-eyed, thinking, all right, just one more. Why does that happen? We feel like we're in the driver's seat of our own minds, right? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the brain and ask a very simple question. Who's really in control here?
I mean, really think about it. How much of what you do, what you think, what you feel is actually directed by you, the conscious you that's listening to me right now? It seems like a pretty straightforward question, but the answer is, well, it's way more complex and honestly more fascinating than you might think. It turns out our brains have some very different ideas about who's running the show.
And look, this isn't just some philosophical thought experiment. Neuroscientists like Ori Maz are pretty clear on this. Most of what our brain does happens completely under the hood. It's kind of like a clock. We see the hands moving, but we have absolutely no awareness of all the intricate gears and springs turning inside, making it all happen. To put that in perspective, you've got almost 90 billion neurons packed inside your skull, all of them firing away, working together to create this seamless illusion that there's just one single you calling all the shots. But is that really what's going on? Let's dig into the evidence. So first up, let's look at a state we all enter every single day where we consciously give up control. Sleep. You might think of it as just downtime, your brain powering off. But for some people, the brain is anything but quiet. It can actually get up to some pretty wild stuff. Let's talk about sleepwalking. It's essentially a glitch in the system. It's this bizarre state of split consciousness. You've got parts of your brain that are awake enough to move around, but the part that's responsible for your personality, for self-awareness, for deliberate choice, your prefrontal cortex, is completely out for the count. Your conscious identity is literally not in the room. And the things the brain can do on autopilot are just astounding. We're not just talking about mumbling a few words. People have been known to walk, get a snack, even get in a car and drive. There was one patient who woke up to find she had painted a perfect triangle on her kitchen wall overnight with zero memory of doing it. This all happens because the motor part of the brain can work just fine without the CEO being awake. Now, to really wrap your head around this split consciousness, it helps to compare it to something like general anesthesia. See, anesthesia doesn't just put one part of your brain to sleep. It basically takes the whole communication network offline. It quiets down the thalamus, which is like the grand central station of your brain. And when that hub is suppressed, conscious experience just vanishes. It's a totally different ballgame from sleepwalking. All right, so let's move on to our next piece of evidence, which, if you can believe it, is even more mind-bending. What happens when you physically separate the two halves of the brain? Well, research on what are called split brain patients reveals something absolutely astonishing. You can basically have two distinct minds living in one head. So a super quick brain 101, your brain has two halves, a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere, and they're constantly talking to each other across this massive information superhighway made of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. But in some very rare cases, to treat extreme epilepsy, surgeons will actually cut that highway. And that is when things get really weird. Okay, so check out this classic experiment. Researchers flashed the word Texas to a patient named Joe. But here's the trick. They flashed it so the information only went to the right side of his brain. Now, the crucial thing to know is that for most of us, language and speech live in the left hemisphere. So the right side of his brain saw the word, but it had no ability to speak. So when they asked Joe what he saw, his speaking, left hemisphere, the only part that could answer, said, completely truthfully, I didn't see the word. Because from its point of view, it didn't. That information was totally locked away in the other half of his brain. But the right brain knew, and it found another way to communicate. This is the brilliant part. Watch how the two minds worked it out. Joe's right brain, the one that saw Texas, used his left hand to draw a clue, a cowboy hat. Then his speaking left brain looked at the drawing, put two and two together, and shouted, Texas. The two halves of his brain communicated, but they did it on the piece of paper, not inside his head. It's just powerful proof that the unified I we all feel isn't so unified after all. So we've seen how the brain itself can be divided against itself. But it's not just our internal machinery. Our sense of who we are and what we control is also being shaped by this huge network of hidden influencers, from physical brain damage to forces we can't even see. The classic case of Phineas Gage is just such a dramatic example of this. This guy was a responsible, well-liked railroad foreman, but then a freak accident sent a huge iron rod straight through his prefrontal cortex. Miraculously, he survived, but his personality was completely changed. Gage became impulsive, profane, he couldn't stick to a plan. The accident literally destroyed his brain's thermostat for social behavior, proving that who you are is physically wired into your brain.
And of course, it's not just physical damage. I mean, think about all of the invisible puppeteers pulling at your strings every day. Your own emotions like guilt or greed, the social expectations from everyone around you, your environment, past traumas. And then there are even deeper forces, like, believe it or not, the experiences of your ancestors.
No, this is not science fiction. In one amazing study, scientists taught mice to fear the smell of almonds by giving them a little shock every time they smelled it. What they found was that the offspring of these mice were born with more almond smell receptors in their noses. It's like a biological memory of their parents' trauma was passed down, wiring them to be extra sensitive to that specific threat from birth.
Okay, so we've laid out all these forces, internal and external, that you don't consciously control. And it might sound a little bleak, right? But here comes the twist. What if, sometimes, the absolute best way to actually be in control is to consciously let go? So to explore this, scientists did something incredibly cool. They put a freestyle wrapper into an fMRI scanner. They wanted to peek inside the brain during a moment of pure, spontaneous creativity. That state where you have to get out of your own way and just let it happen.
The results were just striking. When the rapper was performing a rhyme he had memorized, his prefrontal cortex, that self-monitoring inner critic part of the brain, was highly active. But the second he started to freestyle, to improvise, that entire area went quiet. He literally unlocked his creativity by shutting off his inner critic.
This totally explains that phenomenon of choking under pressure. Think of a basketball player who can sink free throws all day in practice, but then it's the final seconds of the championship game, everything's on the line, and what happens? They start to overthink it. They try to consciously control a scale that's become subconscious, and they miss. Sometimes you just have to trust your brain's autopilot.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's not that you're just a helpless puppet, not at all. It's that the you is so much bigger and more complex than just your conscious thoughts. That vast unconscious part of your brain, that's still you. And real mastery in life isn't about total command and control. It's about fostering this delicate dance, this harmony between the conscious and unconscious parts of your mind. And that really leaves us with a final question to chew on. In a world that is constantly telling us to be in control, to plan every move, to hustle, what are the moments in your own life, in your work, in your art, in your relationships, where the most powerful thing you can do is to trust the rest of your incredible brain and just let go?